Wake up, dead man. Well, not Jeff. You're not a dead man. You're very much alive, and you're here tonight.
I hope so.
With me. We are Earth's Mightiest Critics, and we are here to talk about the latest Netflix release. Yes, we're talking about Netflix again. This is Wake Up Dead Man, a Knives Out mystery. I'm very excited to talk about this film because I've been on a bit of a journey in the last few days with the Knives Out saga. I watched the first one in theaters back in, gosh, what was that, 2018, 19,
Yeah,
something like that?
Mm-hmm.
And I was not a fan. I did not hop aboard the Rian Johnson Knives Out train, although I was, a fan of his work as a filmmaker generally. So I didn't bother watching Glass Onion, which was the Netflix sequel that came out a few years later, very kind of early on in the pandemic, actually. I think it was like 22. I watched that for the first time between last night and today to prepare myself for watching Knives Out 3, aka Wake Up Dead Man. So it's been a bit of a roller coaster. My enthusiasm has gone up and down and then up. I don't know where my head is at. I finished watching the third film about a half hour ago, so it's still fresh in my mind and very convoluted. So I'm here with Jeff of the Establishing Shot and Pipeline Artists, and I'm hoping that he can help straighten me out. Maybe I can straighten him out, and we'll all come to a big grand conclusion about Knives Out 3 and whether or not we want to see a fourth installment of the misadventures of one Monsieur Benoit Blanc. Jeff, how you doing?
Good, Ian. Great to see you.
Well, it's great to see you too. Coming in from the cold to warm up with a nice murder mystery.
Yes.
What I want to start with talking about how you felt about the Knives Out saga in general, because I think that could help us set the table a bit here. I've given you my high level thoughts. So where do you fall on this?
I was a big fan of the Knives Out film, and I think in retrospect now, after being through 3 films, I think there are more obvious reasons to me as why that I can probably describe a little bit better than maybe at the time. I think at the time, I was impressed to see any kind of murder mystery on the big screen. They had been sort of given way to CBS shows like Murder, She Wrote and Diagnosis Murder and some of those kind of shows, and as taken up by the likes of Elsbeth now. And they're a little obvious. I know they have to be. They've only got an hour to do it, and they got to get to the conclusions in about 45 minutes. But I thought it was pretty clever and twisty, but I also think it was benefiting from a number of things which seemed very novel at the time. For starters, it was a different role for Daniel Craig, and he's doing a sort of a Falcon Leghorn Sylvan accent and kind of hamming it up a little bit and being very loosey-goosey, which he was never as Bond. Right. I also think you had Ana de Armas kind of in her big breakthrough role where she was very funny and sexy, and she's also this suspect that shouldn't be a suspect, but you're rooting for her not get caught. And she's got this wonderful little peccadillo where when she lies, she's going to vomit. So, there's always this sort of her blowing chunks all over the screen. The last thing, and I think this cannot be underestimated, I think it's sorely missing in both of the sequels, is the presence of Christopher Plummer. Christopher Plummer as the sort of person who gets the whole mystery going. He is the victim. There was such gravitas in that character, in what he did and was to all those people, as well as Plummer, I think, just giving it an elegance, a class, sort of a seriousness. His scenes with Ana de Armas, I think, were the best in the film. And unfortunately, they're in the first half hour of the film. But I think he gives it all a great deal of weight and seemingly importance, as well as the fact that through him, because he's a mystery writer, they can sort of vamp and tease and satirize a little bit sort of the conventions of Holmes and Agatha Christie and Edgar Allan Poe and all those other even television detectives that we've all grown up on, and Rian Johnson did too and professes to love. The second one was a lot simpler. I think it was more funny. I think it was a little bit of 1 or 2 rug pulls that were really pretty good. The Janelle Monáe character, I think, being her twin sister was such a cliche from all kinds of mysteries, including those that generally are a part of the comings and goings of soap operas. And that I think was fun too, though I dare say there wasn't as much of a mystery to that one. This one,
it was not as complex for sure.
Exactly, not as complex. And then I think this third one has gone into much more complex storytelling, maybe too complex for my money, albeit with some different things that give it some interest. And I think I'll applaud Rian Johnson for that, at least, that he's trying these things on the big screen where it's very, very few and far between. He tries to give it a real college try, and cast good actors and give them sort of meaty roles and stuff. And I think each time do something a little bit different, especially with this one where really Benoit Blanc doesn't show up until about 45 minutes in, even though he's in that first scene receiving the letter. But the person who's narrating it, and ostensibly the Holmes and the Watson in a way until he shows up, as well as potentially Moriarty because they think he might be the killer, is the Father Judd, played by, oh gosh, why am I blanking on his name right now?
Josh O'Connor.
Josh O'Connor, yes, who's very, very good in this and gives it his all. But I think it is probably been given a lot of hosannas because of those first points I made, that I think that Rian Johnson is attempting to do things like Murder on the Orient Express, Death on the Nile, the Agatha Christie movies, and then there were none that you witness for the prosecution that you saw as kind of staples throughout Hollywood since really the 30s or 40s. And then, it has been mostly given way to television. And I think there's a lot of cleverness in what he does, though I think they're all a little bit flawed, and I think they could be simplified. But, I'd rather look at that than the 15th Transformer sequel or Fast and Furious Go to the Moon, because cars need to drive on the moon fast. For the drag race between that and the Left Behind dune buggy. So that's a little bit of where I'm at and sort of the whole overarching thing. But I think it's serving an interesting purpose. Like, oh, here's one of those. We don't see many of those very often. And he always does something different with it and kind of keeps you guessing, which is part of the fun of these kind of things. But I think in retrospect, he's got, if he does, as you said, if we talk about doing a fourth one, I think he's got some things to consider on how we can, I think, help the franchise a little bit, even though arguably it's pretty successful.
Yeah, I mean, I think I agree with pretty much everything that you said there. I just kind of disagree with my own personal approach to the effectiveness of it.
Sure.
He can't get out of the way of, I think, his own politics, and that's really annoying. Sometimes they're little digs, and sometimes they're very big, overt things. Like there was a whole Trump thing back in the first Knives Out. The second one it's amazing because that movie, even though it came out in, I think, 22, felt like it could have been released today because Edward Norton was essentially a doppelganger for Elon Musk and just like ripping him to shreds before he had even really thrown his lot in.
That's right.
With the new administration. So, or the current administration at that point. It's just, and then here there's a big thing with Catholicism, and I am a Catholic. I grew up Catholic. I was sort of lapsed, and within the last couple of years, I've sort of rediscovered that aspect of my faith. I'm a regular churchgoer, as they say, and so watching this film, it felt a lot like Scarface, thematically, in that you spend 2 hours and 10 minutes watching Tony Montana get rich, whack people in creative ways, do all the drugs, get all the women. And then at the end, he dies, and the message is, but it's really an anti-drug movie. Here, it's like people crapping all over Catholicism in very blatant monologue-y ways, and the way that some of the characters are drawn. And then at the end, I think the last 20 minutes of this thing are the most solid out of the entire picture, as kind of tends to be with these Glass Onion things, the big reveal and the turn. But here there really was more of an emotional element and something that was approaching connecting with not just faith, because faith is sort of one of those wishy-washy words that's kind of like spirituality. When you're dealing with Catholicism, it's a very specific religion with specific tenets and rituals and beliefs, and to just kind of lump that in with faith, it kind of gets you there. But I was kind of searching for a balance to some of that. I'm not going to go so far as to call it blasphemous, but this isn't going to recruit anybody to coming to church on Sundays or even being curious. I think it's going to reinforce a lot of negative stereotypes about Catholicism, and I don't quite know how to feel about that because there's no balance in the movie. He can say whatever he wants. He's the artist, but as I'm watching it, I'm thinking, he is literally preaching to the converted.
Well, it's an interesting summation and proposition there. I think you've raised, Ian, because I think one of the things that, as you're talking and I'm thinking about the film, it feels in some respects more like he's, dare I say, trying to take the piss out of the evangelicals. I think the way the father who's killed in it, and sort of Wicks, and his sort of
Monsignor Wicks, played by Josh Brolin. We haven't really set the movie up, so
I'm sorry, we haven't. No, do you want me to set up the movie for us first, and then I can start?
Actually, yeah, I was going to say we can kind of do it as we go along, but maybe I think you've got it right, Jeff. If you can kind of give us the overview, because I know the details are complicated, but what's the overview of this one?
Well, the overview of this one is that Benoit Blanc gets a letter from a priest. A priest named Judd Duplantis, I guess is how you pronounce that name. He's mostly called Father Judd throughout, but that's the Josh O'Connor role. And he's writing because he needs help with this murder that's kind of gotten out of hand in his local sort of small community up in upper state New York, where the Monsignor who he was apprenticing under has been killed, and they're trying to figure out who did it. And as we find out, one of the reasons he's writing the letter is he has now become the prime suspect. But he lays all the groundwork for a good 45 minutes where, I mean, you don't see Daniel Craig except him reading that letter in the very first shot. And then I think he's like, I'm going to go skiing over for a couple of weeks during Christmas vacation while the rest of you people shoot the movie. But he doesn't show up for a long, long time. And it's really all Father Judd's movie. And he's very good in this. He's earnest. He's serious. He's a true man of faith. He believes in God. He believes in the church. And he butts heads with Wicks because Wicks is very political and sort of self-serving and, sort of a charismatic who's very powerful and strong and has basically driven away a lot of his flock except for the true believers. And he's got a little bit of a cultish kind of flavor to him, which is, I think, also a little bit of a misread of what's going on within the Catholic Church. It might be better served for other religions. But anyway, Father Wicks ends up getting killed. It looks more and more like Father Judd is the person who somehow done him in. And then finally, Benoit Blanc shows up and works with the Father Judd, basically almost in tandem, with a little bit of help from an outside sheriff who's named Geraldine, who's Geraldine Scott, played by Mila Kunis. But mostly it's sort of a Holmes and Watson thing, although I dare say it seems like a Holmes and Holmes, given what we've invested in Father Judd from the very first moment until the 45-minute mark when Blanc shows back up. And then they find a lot of different things going on. Of course, the parishioners are not quite the people they present them as. They're a little bit more duplicitous and have their other agendas. So did Wicks. There's a backstory involving a harlot who was connected to Wicks's father and a missing jewel, and all kinds of shenanigans ensue, if you will, with lots of misdirects and who's the killer now, who's really done this. And I think to your point, when it's going through all that, it gets a little bit like, well, it's okay to just settle on one ending, Ryan, but he does about three. But I think the cool thing about it, and what I guess I am sort of taking away now, having seen it weeks earlier, that did impress me and why I did end up recommending it, is I like the fact that I think he's actually very positive at the end about the church. He never makes Father Judd into a terrible figure. Even when he's, at his lowest and fraught and everything else, he's admirable, he's smart, he's good, he's well-meaning, he's trying to help people, he's trying to figure out the crime too and do good there. And, even though, Blanc could have come in and still does to some degree come in as like, I believe in facts and science and all this religious hodgepodge is for the people who need to, have sort of like them told what to do and all that kind of stuff. I don't think they push that nearly as hard as I thought they might have, knowing given what Johnson has done previously in some of his movies and his tendency towards being sort of that kind of statement filmmaker. But I'll tell you what, I'll just tell you just quickly, and then maybe this is a good talking point. The scene that did it for me and maybe changed my entire interpretation and affection for the film was after they're kind of in the throes of all this, trying to figure stuff out, and Blanc is getting a little frustrated, and there's too many things and too many red herrings, and people aren't who they say they are, and they're all sneaking around. They're trying to find out some information, and they're talking to a woman on the phone.
Louise. Yes. I knew you were going to talk about Louise, because that was a turning point for me as well. But please go ahead.
Well, she is giving him some basic information about some information they needed to help solve the thing. And as it turns out, with not really suspecting it to go there, she asks the father if he can listen to her for a few minutes because she's feeling very lonely. She had a fight with her mother, who's in hospice, and they spoke ill words to each other the last time they were. The mother was able to speak for herself, and she's now in hospice, probably on the precipice of dying, and she's worried about, this is the last thing that my mother saw of me, and I don't think I can ever forgive myself. And it really shattered her. And it's played so well by Bridget Everett, who's a funny comedian who's become quite the dramatic actress in a lot of these kinds of serial comic shows.
I don't know if I've seen her. Where is she from?
Her big claim to fame was when she was first in these little bits at the end of Amy Schumer's show. Inside Amy Schumer, on where she would do this sort of song in a stand-up act, and then she'd go into the audience and sort of shake her big body and her loose dress in the faces of the various people. And then she'd been in things like some movies and Trainwreck and her own shows and series. But then she kind of got her big break with her own show on HBO, and that is called, let me get it right here, I just want to make sure it's Somebody Somewhere, and it's kind of a serial comic look at people who are a little bit on the outside looking in, sort of fringe people who aren't necessarily happy, and they have some sad parts in their life and their grievances, and she's very good in it. It's funny, but it reminded me a lot of Baskets. Remember that show with Zach Galifianakis and Louis Anderson? It's that kind of show, or even Tim Robinson kind of stuff, where it's a little bit about people who we laugh at, but they're kind of pitiable and kind of, not sort of like, glamorous people we follow in of a show. And she's very good dramatic actress, even though it's a comedy, but it's kind of a dark comedy and a serial comedy.
And it sounds like she would be perfect for this kind of role. And it does feel kind of like a bit part, but it is a very crucial one, and that's why I kind of get that feeling. Like it's like that scene in Wayne's World 2 with the gas station attendant, and then they pull in Charlton Heston to to play the role. Like this felt like that, like they got someone really good to play this quote unquote nothing part, until you realize as the scene ends and what happens to Father Judd as a result of that conversation, like, wow, that was a key moment.
It was. It reminded me a little bit too of Home Alone, when Kevin goes to the church and he talks to the old man, and suddenly becomes a serious movie. It was just kind of a farce before then, and they even tie him into the sort of conclusion of the comedy, but then also they pull at your heartstrings in the last seconds too, when he reunites with his granddaughter and family. But same here, and what I loved about it, and this is why I'm almost feeling moved as I'm telling you. I hope I don't tear up, but Benoit Blanc is very impatient at that time. He's trying to get this information because he needs this, and he's feeling it. It's just on the cusp of figuring this out, and Father Judd shuts him down and says, "No, I'm talking to this woman. She needs help." And he closes the door, and they dissolve to much later. It's now dark out, and Father Judd is just wrapping up talking to her. Like he might have talked to her for 2 hours. And I just felt like that's somebody who maybe deep down, despite the fact that he's critiquing the church and making fun of people who believe in religion, and of course we're going to have a murder in a church, how blasphemous is that, and everything else. But I think he gets it. I think he understands what the power of religion is. And I dare say, I think that's the power of the Catholic Church too, with our new Pope and different things. I think he's more making fun of the people who use church to sort of wear it on their sleeve or use it as judgment of other people in a snide way, sort of the way evangelicals have in politics for a while now, and things like starting with Jerry Falwell. But it's funny that he channels it into the Catholic Church, because it didn't feel very un-Catholic to me, because I don't feel that it's really the actual accurate satire of Catholicism.
And that's what I want to get back to, but I do want to talk about the way that it's almost like a sub reveal. When Blanc goes through that door and he sees Judd, he doesn't know that he's still talking to that woman, and we don't know either, because Judd is just kind of sitting there in the dark, almost, from my recollection, kind of like hunched over, almost like in a prayer position. And it's at that point where he says, "Oh, that's right. Yes." And then he said, and then he kind of like, he's sitting there, he's quiet, like he's listening. And then he kind of says the closing prayer, and then he gets up, and you're like, oh, they've been having a deep conversation. This is a beautiful moment. issue, I think you're kind of hitting on it, Jeff. And I mentioned before we hopped on that well, after I finished watching the movie, I was doing some power cleaning in the kitchen and listening to. I had looked up on YouTube kind of reactions to Wake Up Dead Man because I was very curious, not just like from film critic punditry, but I found what I was looking for. A podcast that I'll link below. I don't have it handy right now, but it's two Catholic priests talking about Wake Up Dead Man, and one of them, I don't have his name on me right now, but was actually the sort of the Catholic technical advisor to Rian Johnson and his team on the film. And they were kind of going into, well, this is what they got right. This is what, the priests we watched it with, they weren't so happy with it, that kind of stuff. But overall, they got it more right than wrong. It's a decent representation. But what kind of bugged me was it was more what they weren't saying and what they weren't talking about. Like, for example, Father Judd, he does have faith, but he's got a very kind of un-Catholic, unconventional take on it, which Father Monsignor Wicks sort of is like the amplified all the way across the far end of the spectrum version of it, which is that the world has gone so dark and is so corrupted by, he says, Marxism, feminism, all this other stuff. And he's like, Jesus needs to be a warrior and not the soft counselor, right? We need to punch back at the world. We're at war. But in the opening scene, which is kind of what the inciting incident, or I guess the flashback where you see why Father Judd gets sent to this small church, he kind of speaks out of turn. Someone speaks out of turn to him, punches the other priest in the face. He gets called in front of this council and basically gets like, you're still in the church, but we're sending you to a very small church. You can't be here anymore. The way he's talking there and throughout most of the film until he sort of has that conversion and talking to Louise, my question was, I don't know how old this guy is. I know that he joined the church when he was 17 after he was in a boxing match with someone and his opponent died in the ring, and that was sort of his catalyst for finding God. If this guy's twice that age, like early 30s, it takes a while to become a priest, like years and years and years. My question is, how the hell did, no pun intended, how did this guy get through the process? Because this is the kind of crisis of faith where if you're having this, I imagine there's going to be people along the way saying this, you're a believer and you're sincere, but you are not a Catholic priest. Or as we see later on, especially in the movies, the old embittered, cynical priest who's seen it all. Think Father Marin or not, Father Karras in The Exorcist, right? Been doing it a long time and has lost faith in the world. Yeah. This guy should be in the sweet spot where he's still a true believer. Maybe he sees something that shakes his faith, but we're not really privy to that. I had too many questions about this guy throughout the entire movie, and foremost of which, why are you here?
Well, let me ask you this, because I wonder if you saw this the same way I did. But see, I think more than indicting God or Christianity or even the Catholic Church, I think it's indicting, people who I think use it wrongfully. I mean, I think Wicks is absolutely wrong that we should be using Jesus as a hammer. I don't think Jesus was ever a hammer, and that kind of stuff is what's getting a lot of people to pull away from the church and be repelled by it. And I think that
he was.
Yeah.
I mean, there are several people get this idea of Jesus as being, the Lamb of God and everything, but he was also the sword. He was here to do war against evil. Right. But the twisting of that meaning by the people in this film particularly is sort of where the problem comes from. Jesus had no tolerance for nonsense. So he was not like a pacifist, really, although he was about peace. He was a very complicated man, that Shaft.
But he also was never aggressive, other than maybe turning over the money changers in the temple and stuff. By and large, he was mostly the person who turned the other cheek, as he did even in all of his trial and death. I mean, I think what
run-ins with, well, I mean, certainly the devil and demons and that.
But he never fought the devil the way that you would think he would do what Wicks wanted him to do. I mean, it was
yelling, "Get behind me, Satan!" I think was pretty powerful. Because
yeah, but I mean, if you read the Bible, Jesus is not exactly aggressive. He's winning the argument by heart and soul, not by fist.
No, I mean, well, I'm not talking about like actual.
Well,
I'm
that's what
not
Rich is
talking
talking about,
physical.
because he's very aggressive and physical in it.
He's not. Well, he's talking about culturally changing things. He is not advising people to go out and take up arms and go out into the streets. What he is talking about is in terms of being more aggressive in the rhetoric, and spreading not a message of hate, but a message of like, you can't steamroll over us, and kind of like F you to anybody who would challenge the church. Now, that was not Jesus's message or his tactics. He was all about love, but he also had his lines that he would not tolerate. And that comes across in the scripture, not with him necessarily yelling at people, but being very firm about, no, this is not how you say get into the kingdom of heaven. You need to do this or you're not getting in.
But I mean, see, right there, I think you've illustrated my point. I think the problem with religion across the board is people who don't follow the kind of track of God and the track of Jesus, if you will, by being judgmental, by being cruel, by being hypocritical.
Well, it's not.
Those are the people who are ruining,
but,
I think,
but
religion,
that's
because they're not really subscribing to it properly.
Well, but that's sort of the point. They have an issue with religion in general because that is what religion prescribes. It lays out the rules. Now, whether you agree with those or not, that's a whole other conversation. But it's like you can be judgmental against people for not following, not living by the commandments or whatever, but you don't have the ultimate ability to judge them. That's sort of between them and their God, as they say.
Right.
But if like, I can't say, well, I just watched somebody murder someone in cold blood right in front of me, but who am I to judge? It's all about gradations and things, right?
Right, exactly. And I mean, I think some of those are the more severe examples of it. But I mean, do you not wear fabrics made with joined cloths? The Old Testament says that's a sin. It is not a sin. That was written at the time in a time period that we can adjust and adapt to. But other things where the line has been moved along, or people, this is why I said the evangelicals. I mean, I think the evangelicals have ruined religion more in a lot of respects than any Catholics have, despite the fact that, we love to use the Catholic priest as the poster boy for,
and that's
children molestations and stuff like that. It's this very angry sort of snide, like, you don't belong, you are not welcome here, we don't want you, you are not part of the club kind of attitude. That there's nothing in the Bible that it talks like that. Nothing in Jesus' world ever said anything like that. He didn't hang out with the rich people. He didn't hang out with the powerful. He hung out with lepers and poor people and the sick and all those people. And he's not the party that would want to throw people off of healthcare. And yet, evangelical party under Mike Johnson is the party that wants to deny people healthcare. So to me, those are the kind of things that I think he's getting at here, but I don't think it's fair to lay it at the Catholic Church, because I don't think that's part and parcel of the Catholic Church at all, to your very point earlier.
That thing about the mixed fabric, you brought up, the key phrase was Old Testament.
Yes.
Once Jesus shows up, all of that stuff, nobody talks about that stuff anymore. Okay. There is a definite switch in the kind of world that was.
Some do, though, Ian. Some I've heard evangelicals talk about both.
I'm not talking about the particular religious sects. I'm talking about what is, on the printed page, because that is a whole thing I've heard, like, well, do you eat shellfish? You're not supposed to do that. I'm like, yeah, that's right. Okay.
Don't touch the skin of a pig. I guess you can't play football on Sunday.
Right.
So I think there's a big famous scene in The West Wing about all that. But anyway, go ahead.
But no, I mean, I think you're getting to the heart of something, which is that if he's got, and one of the things that came out in this podcast is that Rian Johnson did not know anything about the Catholic Church or Catholicism before he wrote this movie. And that's one of the reasons he wanted to have a technical advisor. And the guy kind of helped him out with like literal technical things, like down to the vestments. And there's a funny story about how the priest was going to give mass, and he got a cell phone call from one of the producers saying, we don't know what genuflecting means. I'm like, wow.
How can they not look that up?
Well, I'm just saying, like, you're making a movie about Catholicism. You are way out over your skis if you don't even know what genuflecting is. So it's just that kind of, I think it gets to what we're talking about here, which is it's all kind of like religion, except like, I think it'd be really interesting if he tried to do something about, we're gonna take this to Islam, and we're gonna set this, we're gonna have knives out in a mosque and see what that, this same story, but with a different faith, and see how cute people think it is. And that's the sort of the Christianity, and the different versions of it are the kind of the big whipping boy punching bag for the world religions. And, people have their right to feel that way, but it is kind of disheartening to watch a film from someone who I think is a very smart filmmaker and can write, very deft, skillful puzzles for the audience to figure out, but he can't settle down and care enough about the basics to play in a sandbox that he understands or even respects. Because there are these little digs, aside from Blanc's big kind of eye-rolling speech when he first shows up about the hypocrisy of religion. Like at the very end of the movie, he says something like, he's talking, I think it's during the reveal scene, he's like, well, God is a fiction. And he's saying that to Judd, or he's saying at least in front of Judd. And at no point does Judd say, well, hold on a second. There's no balance, as I mentioned before, of someone to stand up for the Catholic Church in a way that represents the Catholic Church. The one person that we could have doing that is the guy who's like kind of having the crisis of faith and profession. He doesn't know which direction he should go. That's not what we need in this. We need Christopher Plummer as the old priest.
Well, maybe so. That's a fair point. And in some respects, I think that is too easy of a line, and it's too easy to put him up as the foil against Father Judd for that kind of reason. Oh, he's got science and facts and all that aside, and I don't believe that those two have to be mutually exclusive from what religious beliefs are, and they are all part of that. I mean, I'll just say, put my cards on the table here. I've always said to people since I was in youth fellowship and stuff like that in church, as a Methodist when I was a kid, that I think that you can find God in everything you do because there is creation in everything that's being done. It just can't be, random coincidences. I don't, first of all, believe too much in coincidence anyway. I think things happen that sort of set things up that seem, oh, well, how does that happen? Well, here's how. All these 5 things were perfectly aligning it up. But, if you think just about our profession as writers or artists, both which we are, if you draw a person's holding his hand out and you haven't foreshortened the arm enough to make it believable that it's in front of me, this a foot and a half or whatever, that's science. That's math. That's creation. That's figuring it out, because there is a perspective, and there's science and math in perspective. There's science and math in perspective in the words we write, putting together a sentence, using a verb properly, an adverb properly, et cetera, even semicolons and things like that. Everything is sort of music is design, and it can't just be all random, because there has to be some sort of person seeing the bigger picture, and there's too much art and loveliness for it to just be like, well, somehow these things just fell into it, and isn't that a beautiful flower? No, that's not really how it happened. I'm sorry. If you believe that, then you're going to wait for 10,000 years for the monkeys to tap out Citizen Kane. But the one thing that I think maybe just as a little bit of a counter, and maybe this is where I think Blanc gets pushed back on his heels a little bit. At least I saw him getting pushed back because he thinks he's the know-it-all, and he really isn't necessarily here, is that, it's easy for him to say that, but I think that Father Judd shows by more action, if you will, sort of where he is right, and maybe that's his argument against Blanc in a way, because I think that Judd never really loses his, the sense of purpose, a sense of good, taking the time out, even though they're in the middle and the thick of this murder mystery, to help a soul who needs some real help right there. And it doesn't necessarily affect the big picture of the law, but it affects that woman's life. And I just think that there are moments like that in there, and that Judd stays this admirable character, even when he's falling around and sliding through the mud and stuff like that. I think he comes out of this smelling like a rose, and I think Benoit Blanc is challenged, and rightfully so, on a number of instances. And maybe his words are definitive, but I don't think at the end he's as definitive about all the things that he's seen in action that maybe would persuade him otherwise.
Well, I think I agree with you to an extent, except for his exiting scene, which I hated, because spoiler alert, the banner's going at the bottom, folks. At the end of this movie, after the killer or the grand scheme mistress is revealed, Father Judd closes down the church and then reopens it with some changes, including the name of the church, which is a nice touch.
Yeah.
And he's saying goodbye to Benoit Blanc, and Blanc's like, well, I got to hit the road. And then Father Judd says, well, would you like to stick around? I'd like to invite you to attend my first mass. And Benoit Blanc says, something like, there is no place, or something. I can't remember the name of it, but like, or how he exactly phrased it. But he was like, I would rather be anywhere else but here, or that pretty much like that. It was the polite way of sounding, no, thank you. I don't want to get any church on me, which, you know, it's kind of cute. But to your very point, after everything they've been together, you might think that he'd at least stick around to see this guy. And as he keeps telling him, this is what you were meant to do. You were meant to reach out and help people. And you're going to be doing that through the instrument of the church. But my disdain for this institution is so great that I won't even see you on your debut mass, giving your debut sermon and trying to see what that's all about. Even if I get back in my car 45 minutes afterwards and hit the road with some nice memories, I'm too freaked out or too much of a non-believer to support my friend in that way.
I agree with you. I think that was the wrong move for that end, and I think it hurts the Blanc character to be dismissive like that. I think he should have been more open-minded, and I think to some degree this was the movie where he was forced to be more open-minded, but still not enough to have really learned the lessons properly to end it better. I'm with you, and I think that's a little bit, trendy too, or maybe, we always want to make sure that intellect prevails over faith or heart or stuff like that. But I think everybody needs a little more faith in their life, and at least believe in something that's greater than them and not necessarily just so easily dismissed. And I think it's unfair to wrap all the sins of the Catholic Church that, yes, for many centuries has had problems and throughout the world, as most religions probably have and most institutions have, especially when you've got an example in Father Judd, who defies that, at least in one single case, says that this is not all of the church. And I think that would have been a better ending. I'm with you on that. I also think it's a little bit easy to say that everyone who's in the service, who's the main character here, who's sort of the core faithful who stick with Wicks, they all have their sort of peccadillos and their problems. And of course they're sinners, but they're kind of awful sinners in a way, and maybe not as truthful. It would have been nice if there was one person who was in that. I also thought they could have made the sheriff character somebody who, maybe was somebody who went to the church as well, and so she's maybe sort of there on the side of the angels a little bit as she's trying to figure out where she fits in with trying to do her job as a police officer, as well as sort of reconcile some of the things that she's dealing with people in her community who she thought were fellow parishioners. It's a little bit easy for the law always to stand outside of it, when I don't think for most of the world's sake, and even today, we separate church and state that well. Now, I know it's in the Constitution, we talked about it, and that kind of stuff, but we really don't. I mean, most governments, have Christmas services and talk about God in prayer meetings and things like that. Eisenhower put it in the Pledge of Allegiance in the 50s. It's been there for a long, long time. So this idea that we don't separate this, and this somehow the lawful people or the people who are dealing with intellectual exercises can't find a room for a little more heart and faith, I think is a misnomer.
Well, also, the Mila Kunis character, who I thought was low-key great in this movie, because that is definitely a part that could have gone to any kind of character actress.
Yes.
And it's been a while since I'm certainly not up on everything, but it's been a while since I've seen her. So when I see her, I'm like, oh, this is interesting, because she's kind of getting into that stage. And this is not a knock against her or kind of actresses who once were in their 20s who are now entering a different phase in their career, but she used to be kind of like the sex pot, the hottie and all that stuff. But now she's just the cop, and she's very good as the cop. But one thing you had said about why couldn't she have been part of this congregation, I think she might have been Jewish, because at one point when she's at the in the church for that big climactic scene, she says something like, "What is with all this mishigas?" or something like that.
Maybe missed that line, but yeah.
Right. And it was right around that time where Blanc mentioned the God is a fiction thing. I'm thinking, you've got two people here who are ostensibly, I don't know, somehow
they're speaking the language of religion, and you're just dismissing it outright without even considering. I also think it made him a bad detective, or ostensibly he could have realized it was making him a bad detective by just dismissing that, because there's motive there, even if it's good or bad. There's understanding religion maybe sets up understanding of why the crime happened the way it did and stuff, which, you can't do it. I mean, that's what I've always liked about, the people who, like the Will Graham character, or in the Thomas Harris novels, where he tries to understand where the serial killer is coming from, see it through his eyes. And, profilers do the same thing. John Douglas, when he started the FBI profiling, and, the show on Netflix called Mindhunter is based on him basically starting out, even though they changed the names to protect the innocent. I think Blanc he's a little too much of the cold, dismissive. And the funny thing is, Poirot is a man who had a great deal of faith in his common brother and a sense of the morality as set by that sort of world. Sherlock Holmes certainly did too. I mean, even though Holmes was very dismissive of a lot of humanity, at the end of the day, his decisions and his ability to see the flaws in humanity, I think, gave him the power to then, find the facts in those, and the facts of weak or compromised people.
Well, I don't know if this particular mistake that Blanc makes has to do with what you're discussing or talking about, which I think is very valid, but he almost, it's not that he has not enough or too much faith in humanity, but there's just a moment of sloppiness. Again, towards the end, when everybody's gathered in the church and they're kind of going over the facts of the case as they know them and kind of walking through who was where, when. This is before Glenn Close's character comes in. So all of the potentially guilty parties are sitting there in the pew, even though Father Judd is the main suspect. Mm-hmm. Benoit Blanc has a moment where the sun kind of comes in through the stained glass window and bathes him in light. And he says, it's Damascus. And he's like having it's a callback to the conversion at Damascus story, which you think, oh, maybe this is him literally seeing the light and he's going to have a change. But no, it's just a cute reference point. But he sits down on the steps of the church and says, I can't solve this case. He's basically completely stonewalled. He has no idea how any of this happened. And Cyrus, who turns out to have been the illegitimate son of Father Wick, he has a thing where he tried to be kind of like a Republican influencer. There's a kind of a funny scene where he's talking about, I did the anti-gay stuff, I did the conspiracy stuff, I did crypto and all this other, rattle off this long list of talking points. Anyway, he films everything, and he's sitting in the pew filming that, Benoit Blanc having his breakdown and kind of asking him like, so that's it, the case is wrapped? And he's like, yeah, I don't know what to do. And so he turns it off and he says, I'm good. And then he just gets up and leaves. Blanc lets him leave. The sheriff lets him leave. I'm sorry, they've established that they don't have the answers to this case, but that doesn't necessarily mean, especially that anybody in that room is off the hook.
I agree. I mean, I think if you look not too close, if you look close, you'll find that too many times Johnson is missing the glue that needs to hold this together better. I also think he sometimes pushes things a little bit more for the laughs or the entertainment without necessarily making it logical. Like, for example, in Knives Out, one of the things I think that made a lot of sense there is that they all had sort of the same, dare I say, reason to kill. And that was they want his money. They're rich in the family. They don't want the gravy train to stop. And he was on the crest of basically saying, you're all no good, do nothings, and I'm going to cut you all out before I go. All right. That's simple enough to understand. Most people can understand it, even if they aren't rich, but they don't want to be cut out of a will. And most of their histrionics or even, crazy talk and anger and frustration and arguments are based on that. And that's realistic. Here it's, the cellist player is in a wheelchair because she's lost faith, or the famous author has become this sort of, doomsday conspiracy person. It's just a little too broad. It's just like, why don't you have these people who, for whatever reason, whatever their success rate and or not, have somehow found their way to the church and maybe needed a sort of rabble rouser like Monsignor Wicks to kind of kick them or help them or drag them over the finish line or whatever you need. And I think there's a little bit of that here, but I think it could have just been simpler, and these characters wouldn't have been so sort of broadly drawn. I mean, I think especially like Andrew Scott, who was, putting this moat around his house, that seems like something out of a Carol Burnett sketch almost, more than a real legitimate movie. Even if you want to say, well, he's got a panic room and a bomb shelter. Okay, that's at least recognizable. But putting this moat, it just, some of those kind of moments in the Rian Johnson need to write that into the legit screenplay play too farcical. I think a good editor would have said, that's going a little too far. That's ridiculous. Don't do that.
Well, on top of that, that same guy, that's the highly successful fiction author, who later in the film we see out on his property with the moat, but he's trying to set up these two, or reset up these two suits of armor that are in front of his on his porch in the middle of a lightning storm. Yeah. No, I couldn't pay attention to anything else that was going on in that moment where we see him, because I'm like, what are you doing? You can't be this dumb. And he's not even set up as being an imbecile. I mean, he's a world famous like fiction author who's gone around the bend. But yeah, I mean, that's the thing about the Knives Out movies is I think enjoy the idea of them more than the execution. I think, like I said, Glass Onion, though not a perfect film, I think is the leanest and the most fun, even though it's filled with kind of the biggest caricatures. It at least has these kind of exotic locations and some great kind of set decoration. I mean, the Glass Onion itself is quite unbelievable. But I am getting a little tired, especially watching all three movies in the course of about 48 hours. You really pick up on the patterns. Mm-hmm. You've got Benoit Blanc, who, with the it's not quite the same in Wake Up Dead Man, because he is supposed to be there, but he's introduced as having just kind of stumbled in. Like, that's his thing. Like he stumbles into these mysteries without having been invited, or he's invited deceitfully, which we find out later, but he's always stumbling in like, what's going on here?
Right.
I'm tired of seeing poison glasses switched during the climax. It all comes down to our core group of like 5 or 6 suspects who have some kind of a relationship or vendetta against or indebtedness to the murder victim. I mean, I guess that's the kind of the Christie kind of mold. But if he's making this a series, it is becoming clear that this really is kind of just the same movie over again, except this one's about a famous writer. This one's about Elon Musk. This one's about the church. Like, he's reskinning these stories, and the reveals are getting longer. I feel like the last 30 minutes of this thing is like the reveal, and then there's the big reveal. And like, I'd rather be more, I mean, even The Usual Suspects wrapped all the Kaiser Soze stuff up into a very tight, like 7-minute montage where the movie is the puzzle. I felt like the puzzle was kind of there in places. Most of these things are filler, but it's the big centerpiece is Rian Johnson standing up on a podium telling us how smart he is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's and it's overwritten too, I think, and there's a tendency with modern mysteries to be overwritten because we have to make them more incredible. Because I said in my review, by the time somebody is 18, they've seen 40,000 fictional murders or deaths on the screen somehow.
No wonder we're messed up.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's like it's become the thing, and trying to top that each time is really becomes more insane. Like in Glass Onion, we had the whole puzzle box first. It's like, really, do we spend this much time on this device just to entice these people to come to the party? And in this one, we've got so many layers and different things, and then you've got the little room off the sanctuary, and then the tomb, and then lookalikes, and oh my god, and then vats of body acid, and it's too much. It's too much. It's funny, if you go back to what is probably Agatha Christie's most famous book, and it's, I think, the best-selling mystery of all time, and Then There Were None. It's about 10 people who are invited to a party at an island. They don't know each other, and they're accused of each doing some sort of crime that led to somebody's death. And the question is, are they going to be punished for that death, and are they going to admit that they did it? That's the simplicity of that story. And the hook of it, if you will, the shtick, isn't, different tombs and different doppelgangers and different vats of acid and ways to kill somebody and turn around in different poison glasses. It's really just they're being killed to a nursery rhyme. And it's a dark kid's nursery rhyme, which is funny because it's like, wow, that's a kid's nursery rhyme. It's all about people dying. Yeah. So Agatha Christie was saying, this is our culture, folks. This is British dark humor, and I'm going to make something out of it. That if I was giving Rian Johnson any counsel on how to do a fourth one, it would be keep it simple. Make it simple, make these characters believable, and get good actors to play them, and without having to play extravagance. And give me something that, I'm not suggesting it needs to be, in the business world or something that's a little bit more common, but could Benoit Blanc come into a school and figure out, a school shooting? Could he go into a business and figure out a hostile takeover that led to somebody's death? I mean, just something that's a little bit more recognizable, but can still be fascinating without having to be like, well, we've got a puzzle box and now we've got double identity and now we've got double wine glasses. Oh, it's somebody's seen too many episodes of Murder, She Wrote. You need to just kind of get down to, I mean, here's the funny thing. I'll just say this, and they reference this so they don't reference it to mean anything for most people. But I believe it was in the early 30s, after Agatha Christie had written 3 or 4 books already, that she wrote one of Hercule Poirot's most famous stories called The Murder of Roger Ackroyd. And the funny thing about that one is the narrator who's narrating it, the way, all of the Holmes books have Watson narrating it. And she borrowed that device for when she wrote about Hercule Poirot. Somebody who's working with Hercule Poirot is narrating the story. Generally, Colonel Hastings, who's his trusted friend, who's kind of along with him to play his Watson. I mean, Rob from the best. But in The Murder of Roger Ackroyd, Poirot was on vacation in this community where there's a small town death. And the person who's narrating it is, if I recall correctly, he's the mayor of the town. So he's kind of taken Poirot, well, thank God you're here and you can solve this for us. And we're so glad that you happen to be vacationing. Sort of the same premise that was for Murder on the Orient Express and Death in the Mile. Nobody expects Poirot to be aboard, but he changes the dynamic. Except in The Murder of Roger Ackroyd, on the last page, it is revealed that the man who's been narrating this, telling us all about his comings and goings and doings, is the murderer. And that's what made it such a big success is that, wait a minute, I'm so used to the tropes of this genre already that I'm reading along thinking like, oh, and it's like, wait a minute, and then you go back and read, it's like, oh, of course it's there. And oh, she said it here. And oh, well, I'm so stupid. But it's that simple. And I think Rian Johnson, it would behoove him to be very simple. Have Benoit Blanc hired legitimately to figure out a crime. And he comes in the town and he tries to figure it out. And there are 6 reasonable suspects who are people that are believable without being extravagant, and make them interesting.
It's funny. I was thinking while I was watching this movie that there needs to be some kind of, these movies are full of twists, right? But there needs to be an ultimate twist like what you had revealed, have someone very close, have the assistant character. That's the trope of this movie is he comes in and his Watson is someone who is involved in the crime at hand. He doesn't have the person he regularly partners with, right? But what if Father Judd was the one who killed Father Wicks? What if it was like a Primal Fear situation? Featuring Glass Onion star Edward Norton at the end. One of the great endings where Richard Gere, who's gotten this guy, helped him escape the death penalty for this murder, also involving the Catholic Church, I believe.
Right, that's right.
It turns out that Edward Norton, he's going to be he's going to be in prison for life or something like that, but he got away with it. Mm-hmm. I like the idea of Benoit Blanc solving a school issue. You could call it "We Need to Talk About Benoit." But
there you go. I love it.
But what if?
Oh, go ahead, please.
Maybe this is the last Knives Out mystery. But what if somehow Benoit Blanc is the killer? Or he becomes the main suspect or something like that. I'm sure that's been done before in popular fiction, but
it's Agatha Christie's finale of Poirot. In Curtain, he does away with somebody that he doesn't see any way to stop, who is a bad egg, a bad murderer, and he himself kills him. And the revelation is that after Poirot has died, he's battling cancer at that point, the revelation is that he did the deed that killed this man who was doing all this damage. And Perot's answer was, I can only get him by doing it myself. And it was kind of a controversial thing because she wrote it, I think, in the 50s, but it wasn't released until after she died in the late 70s. But I'll tell you this, even as far as back as, like, I think when Agatha Christie wrote Murder on the Orient Express, which I think was in the 30s, there's the famous part, if you know that, at the end where, hopefully not giving anything a spoiler away here, but
I've seen the movie. I haven't seen the.
Everybody did it. You know, the funny thing is, you know, the old cliche of like, well, he did it or she did it. Well, they all did it. That's the fun trope that you kind of twists there, is they all were part of it. And they're killing a man who's basically like the kidnapper of the Lindbergh baby. That was kind of the crux of it, albeit fictionalized here with the name Daisy Armstrong. But they are all part of the family and or the household, and they take it upon themselves to do in this man who did this and got away with it. And the funny thing that's interesting about it is, before Albert Finney, who's so terrific as Poirot, and it gives his big 20-minute speech where he's basically talking aloud, they said he had to do like 20 pages alone. It's like, yeah, he did. That must have been so hard for him to shoot and hear himself talk. Oh, let's do that scene again. Let's do that line again. Oh, okay, here we go. But the first thing he says is, there's one of two solutions here. One is that a fellow mafiosa snuck on board, dressed as a conductor, and killed him in the middle of the night and escaped into the snowdrift. That's a simple solution. The more complicated one is this other one, where justifiably and deservedly, a reprehensible killer has himself been killed, you know, reprehensibly. and then he leaves it up to the man who's running the train, the guy who owns the train company, played by Martin Balsam in it, to make the decision. And at the end, Martin Balsam says, well, you know, of course, he's got rich customers, and they're certainly justified in killing this terrible man who you know, kidnapped and killed this little baby. He says, we've got the uniform. There must have been a man in it. Let's present that one to the Turkish police. It'll be simple and no questions asked. And so they're all sort of gotten off the hook. But the last line that Perot says to him is, the head of the train company says, thank you for helping us solve this. And Perot says, you're welcome. I'm going to now go back to my cabin, and the remaining time until we pull into the station, I'm going to wrestle with my conscience. And I love that he's got to think like, I let the guy go. I let the 12 of them go, but it makes sense given everything involved. But that would have been, I think, more interesting and could be more interesting in one of these kind of things where, you know, does the detective let the criminal go, even though he solved it? Especially if you're a private detective, you know, do you necessarily owe that same oath to the law? Maybe not. That's maybe not why you were hired. But no matter, I think to your point, he has to make it simpler, and I think it can still be fun and yet a little more recognizable. Now, maybe we don't want to go into school shootings and stuff like that, but is there one of the better episodes in the show Poker Face this year, which Rian Johnson also wrote, and I think it was actually the best episode in the second season, was about a little girl who is jealous of this boy who's also very good in school, and she thwarts his sort of show and tell thing where his little, I think, gerbil or something is killed. So the dead body is nothing more than a mere sort of school mascot, class mascot rodent who's a little animal in the homeroom. And, you know, she doesn't get arrested. She gets reprimanded and she, you know, gets exposed and all this. But like, it's treated like it's kind of a serious crime, even though it's just children. And the little girl is maybe 8 or 9 in it. And that was enough of a twist. Like, this one is, see, that's the kind of thing that maybe Johnson, now he's not going to do the show anymore. I think the show is probably not going to be renewed. It wasn't renewed on Peacock, and I don't know if any other network is going to pick it up. But, you know, something more like that brought into this, where he doesn't feel the need to have to make it so extravagant and elaborate and stuff, I think would be better. Because if it's a really good mystery, I don't think it needs to be, well, that's just the first ending. We've got 2 more to get through. Let's wait and see what happens. Nah, let's just get to the conclusion and make it a very good one. But maybe the emotional fallout from the person being caught or exposed, that's where the extra can be, not in, another paragraph on the Wikipedia page in the plotting department.
Well, I think I don't know if we're ever going to get that, because in addition to these being sort of like throwbacks to murder mysteries, you know, getting these back on the big screen, as you so eloquently put it in the beginning, it's the idea of this is a celebrity showcase.
Yeah.
Like every picture, we've got different. The only recurring character is Daniel Craig as Benoit Blanc, and then the other character actor who pops up. He's almost the Where's Waldo character. He was the assistant detective in Knives Out. He was
Right.
kind of running around the background of
Right.
Glass Onion, and then I think he was the bartender in Wake Up Dead Man. I can't.
Right.
I don't know
Right.
the
That's
actor's
right.
name, but yeah, it's
Right.
like a running joke.
Yeah.
But everybody else is like, we've got to get, you know, 2 Marvel stars and you know, the up and coming ingenue in the form of like, you know, Janelle Monáe or Ana de Armas. It's too big of a celebrity showcase for it to become simple, because you've got to get, you know, everyone has to have their moment in the sun to shine or be part of the twist on the twist and a twist. It almost becomes like Celebrity Survivor or like the Love Boat or something. I don't know. It's
Well,
very weird.
it takes on a little bit of you know, those 70s movies when they had all-star casts, be they disaster movies or some of the bigger epics that were made there. You know, they just trot out. Remember, they'd always have the line of the celebrities at the bottom, you know, like who were a part of the poster that, you know, that, oh my goodness, there's 10 big name stars here, you know, that kind of thing. And they all have their time in the sun and they have to have their moments. I mean, you go back and watch the Poseidon Adventure Day. It's a very good movie by and large, even though it's very pulpy, but they all have their little moments to shine, their little actorly places. And you could say, well, that's the characters. Like, it's also the actors needing a little bit of time to make up for them having to get, you know, sprayed with water on, wear grimy clothes throughout the shoot. So yeah, you're right. I think it's a challenge for him whether or not he could bring it down. But I would love to see him bring it down to like 4 people, get 4 really good actors in it as opposed to 8, and just see what he could do with a smaller room of people. I also dare say, you know, the success of the television series Succession suggests to me that there is ways to do twists and turns in just the way people deal with everybody else, beyond just how they're covering their tracks in a crime, which might make it all the more interesting of a shading on it as well, especially since he's done these very elaborate crimes here. I'm going to say one last thing to you, Ian, too, and then just because I know you might find this entertaining as well as, you know, a little simpler story, but both Murder on the Orient Express and Death on the Nile were 2 of her biggest books, Christie's biggest books. They were big, massive successes as movies and very well done and simplified for the screen as well. I mean, much more elaborate in the books. But the third movie that they did, and the second one with Peter Ustinov, was one done in the early 80s called Evil Under the Sun. And it takes place at a resort. And they had some name actors in it, but mostly just a good cast. And I have watched that a few times since all these kind of things have been kind of back out there again as well. And it's very simple. And the solution is pretty simple. In fact, right before he's going to announce it, he's going to go take a nap for an hour and just sort of rest his little gray cells before he has to talk for 20 minutes. And Peter Ustinov says, I want you to consider a bathing cap, a noonday gun, the high cliffs, you know, and these 4 things. It's like, and they all relate to each other. That's pretty simple. And then it's when he explains it, and it's done in like 10 minutes this time. It's like, God, that was really good. And it just was simpler. And there's something kind of nice about sometimes it doesn't have to be so evolved and elaborate and everything else. So maybe if Johnson is looking at these movies, which he's very fond of, that kind of thing might help him if he doesn't.
Well, I think we almost got the simple, and we kind of talked about this. The simpler version of this movie is Glass Onion.
Yeah.
And what I think, as much as it is kind of the Musk critique, I think that critique does help the story.
Yeah.
Because it's revealed at the end that the globetrotting super genius guy is actually kind of a moron who pays other people to be smart for him.
Right.
And what I loved is that line. It's an exchange. I don't remember exactly how it goes, but Blanc at one point just says, "This is all so dumb." And so we're like, what do you mean? He's like, no, this is literally just stupid. And then he that's when it's revealed that the Norton character is not who he appears to be on several different layers.
I also love the fact that he solved the supposed weekend crime in like 5 minutes. And it's like, you know, so, okay, I guess we need a real crime now after this. That was pretty funny too.
That was very good. And I think as Norton's reaction to that was priceless.
Yeah.
let's see. I was going to say something and then I completely lost it. But we're going to pull over because got some comments.
Oh, okay.
Well, before I forget, I remember what I was going to say. The resolution to this mystery involves this very beautiful, multifaceted $80 million pink jewel that's called Eve's apple, and it's uncovered.
Right.
It's sort of the lost family fortune of the Wicks family, and ultimately it comes down to Monsignor Wicks is dead, so it would go to his illegitimate son Cy, but no one wants him to have the money because he's just going to use it to funnel into his right-wing political campaign, and that would be the worst thing in the world. But at the end, when Judd retrieves that stone, he and Blanc have this tacit agreement to claim that the stone was never recovered.
Right.
And they keep it from Cy, which, according to the morality established by Rian Johnson and the characters in the film, that's the right thing to do. But that stone did kind of belong to him.
Yeah.
And he does blow up, and he's got this cartoonish thing like, if you have any improvements on the church, if I see any suspicious donations, we're coming after you. But he's kind of right. And I don't know, much like the last line that we talked about with Blanc kind of not feeling right for the character, I don't know how I feel about this priest and this hero detective keeping this thing. I did love the image of it being the heart centerpiece of the crucifix. That was a nice image to end on. But how we got there, I thought, was like, this feels kind of ooky.
Or give Cy the chance to himself have a little bit of a change where, with everything that's happened and he's been part of it and seen it and maybe thinking of a bigger picture, he's like, I like it where it is. I think that's a nice choice. Does he have to be still the jerk up until the end? Again, I think, there's a way, if he wants to have this beautiful sort of heart of the crucifix and the symbolism there and what that can represent, and the jewel does too. But does it always have to have somebody loses in order for that to win? I would have liked the idea that maybe he sees it too, and maybe that's part of Judd's or the case's influence on him. It's a little too easy to make him still just this shit that we want to hiss when he's on screen. And I don't know. I think there was an opportunity here. They did it in a number of places very well, but there was even a better opportunity to make it a little bit more. Wow, I'm surprised that movie was as sort of pro-religion and pro-faith and pro-people as they were. And I think in each of those, they could have been a little bit better, including that ending where the person is not a very learned or person who's gone through something and learned something.
I think you hit on it, Jeff. I think because you mentioned, I like that the way it, like that where it is thematically, and I think they kind of set this up throughout the movie, and I think that's why the ending feels like a bit of a betrayal. Wicks's father was the old man, the priest who founded the church, and he dies while giving his last confession or communion, I think, and it's revealed later on that he actually swallowed the gem, and that's what killed him. So it was entombed with his corpse, which there's a whole elaborate thing about blowing open the how do we get this out of the mausoleum that's been sealed up for decades. But he, by all accounts, was a good, genuine Christian man who believed in the Catholic Church. It's that his son, Monsignor Wicks, was corrupted and did horrible things with the message and sired a bastard child who was then kind of he kind of got a member of the congregation to take him in and sort of ruined the life of Kerry Washington's character, at least from her perspective, and went on to become, the seeds of corruption were sown and they were kind of like growing. Imagine if this guy, instead of not having any kind of an arc at all throughout the movie, he's the same at the beginning as he is at the end, without any chance for really development or transformation. Imagine if he had found in Father Judd a reconnection to the church, seeing that it's not just all about this jerk who's been running it and kind of poisoning people with these like combative ideas of religion, but finding a real home for it here and saying, your family's messed up, but that's not who you need to be. We have a place for you here. even though you're not going to be a billionaire or whatever. And that's when we see the reveal of the heart. What you said, I like that there. That would have been a great line for Cy to have towards Father Judd. If he like turns back and he notices it like up in the distance, he sees the glint and he's like, what the, oh, I like that there. And he kind of turns and walks away, or sits down next to Benoit Blanc as mass is beginning because Benoit's going to stick around for the church service and then everybody's happy.
Well, I don't know how he would have heard anything by doing that. Blanc doesn't lose his mind. He doesn't become totally that way, but he recognizes that there's room for heart and head. And the guy who's been through all this and seen where deceit and betrayal and avarice and ego gets you, he changes a little bit too. And you know what? I'm okay. I've been living without that jewel. I'll find a way to do it. And I like that. And I think that's good for all of us. I don't know how that would have been bad. I think that would have been really a nice, dare I say, holiday season kind of message even.
My heart was literally just warmed right now listening to you talk about that, Jeff. And I'm kind of, no, I'm it's another notch kind of against this movie that I didn't even think I had in me. I'm like, why couldn't we see that? That's when AI fully becomes incorporated into the art of making your own movies. I'm going to rewrite with that ending. And
you and I will write a mystery that is very kind to people who believe in faith and who have faith. I think it's too easy of a mark in movie after movie, and I think there's so many ways it could be really a wonderful thing.
Yes. As I promised, got some comments. I'm just gonna kind of breeze by Sejua's because he said he's watching the movie.
Watch the movie, yeah.
50 minutes in, very good. And then he noticed that we were talking spoilers, so he's like, he'll come back afterwards.
Come back afterwards.
Yeah. But we have Petty. Hanging out.
Our good friend Petty. Welcome.
Long time no see, bud. Hey guys, didn't the criticism of the church disguise his jokes bother you? Yeah, we kind of talked about that. I think you joined late in the show, Petty. So go back and watch this when it's when you can do a replay. And we kind of got into all of that.
Laughs there, yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Balding Fanatics, cheap viewers on Streamboo. Got to check that out. Relentless. Petty says, and one more thing, when you saw Glenn Close in the cast, didn't you already know she was inevitably going to be Benoit Blanc's antagonist? Yeah.
Or
did you, Jeff? I did not. It's one of those things where I just figure it could literally be anybody.
Does the biggest star become the most important character? And I thought, wow, they're not doing much with her, but I kept thinking, I think she said yes to this because there's more to do with her, and sure enough. So I think Petty's got a good thought there. I mean, sometimes not. I mean, Richard Chamberlain was, I think, 10th bill in Tony Inferno, and he's the real villain. So you never know. But a lot of times when the bigger stars, they tend to have a little more to do. That's why Kevin Spacey didn't want to do any publicity for Seven, and he was right. You know, if they had sent him out, and I was like, wonder who he's going to play. Well,
I still love that. Like, you can watch Seven now, and the scene, the first time we really see John Doe is when he's ambushing. I wanted to call him Lucius Fox, Morgan Freeman, and Brad Pitt in the stairwell. He takes the picture,
and that is Kevin Spacey.
And you can hear it in the voice.
Yes,
right.
I love. You're like, he was honest about that. He didn't have a fake actor play another actor play it.
But it's just such a quick moment. You're like, is that? No, I don't even know who that is. But when it comes out, you're like, oh my gosh, it was there all the time.
Yep. There you go.
So. And then Petty says, why can't I click on this? There. Okay. After that, it's a very enjoyable movie. Yeah. I really liked Glenn Close's final scene. I thought that was pretty touching. Although, yeah, I must admit, maybe I need to, as Mark Krawcheck says, turn in my critics card because I did not see that turn coming.
That's hilarious. So much. That's so funny.
And then Petty, very generous with the donation. Thank you very much. Very small contribution to the Kicking the Seat end of the year party fund. When the party happens, Ian should buy the genius Jeff a drink.
Wow, that is very kind of you, Penny. My goodness, you made my night. After being a guest here, made it already. So thank you.
Yes. Yeah, I thank you, Jeff, for hanging out. Earth's Mightiest critics are currently tangling with a giant snake. I'll make with that what you will. But you are here and I'm here, so we are still Earth's Mightiest critics. Damn it! I will say, speaking of end of the year, we do have something lined up for the 30th of December. I don't know if we're going to do anything live next week because it's Christmas and all that, and people are crazy busy. But I do know that we're going to be back here on December 30th, 8 p.m. Central, talking about a New Year's Eve party movie of sorts, Boogie Nights by Paul Thomas Anderson.
It's a great one. There's a lot of New Year's Eve parties in that movie.
There's one that's it's a blast. Man, I can't wait to revisit that one. But yeah, so that's something to look forward to. Jeff, what do you? I kind of introduced you at the beginning, but give us the spiel. Tell us about Jeff York and where he can find you.
Oh, you can follow my movie blog, the establishingshot.org. I'm on Instagram at Jeff York Chicago and Jeff York Caricatures. I do caricatures of movies and shows I like particularly, so it's something that is always a little bit of a telltale sign on my site. Oh, he must like that movie. He did a drawing of it. Yes, he did. And I'm also on Twitter as Jeff York Writer there, so a number of ways to see all my stuff. I place it all over the place. And then, of course, I write a couple things for the pipelineartist.com online magazine every month, usually about sort of trends in the business, sometimes interviews, sometimes critiques of a sort of a genre or problems with the genre. So that's where you can follow me if you want on those places, and I'd be much obliged.
Excellent.
And I'm a pretty frequent guest here, so it's almost like I'm, and Jeff York as the special guest.
You're talking about like movies that have huge celebrity casts. It always bothered me when they would say "and special guest appearance by."
Oh, yes.
Like, what is this, TV? It's a movie. They're just in the movie.
Isn't that funny? And then they do that with regular series, like Jonathan Harris. He was like, they'd already given June Lockhart and Guy Williams the big things, as well as that Cartwright girl because of Sound of Music. So I said, I want to be a special guest star. And they kept it, even though he's in every episode. It's like so dumb. But that was the credit for him in the Lost in Space series, all 3 seasons.
I did not know that.
Isn't that funny? Damn. I know. That's weird, but there it is.
All right. Well, we got lost in the very spacious Wake Up Dead Man, a Knives Out mystery, which I recommend. I've got a lot of quibbles with it, but I think, especially for, I would say, people of faith, it's a good movie to watch and see what your interpretation of the way that it's presented is. And also this conversation, Jeff, I really appreciate this. I think you've kind of opened me up to a number of things. And yeah. Oh, hold on a second. Petty also he wraps up by saying Merry Christmas and Happy New Year. Bye. Bye, Petty.
That's very nice.
Love you.
Well, come back and keep the very loving compliments coming, Petty. You make me feel nice. That's very sweet of you. Oh, but yeah, it's always a great show with you, Ian. I love doing your show, and you're such a good host and a smart man. So it's always a great conversation. I think people like listening to it. So,
well, I hope so, and I like to think that I'm mostly only as smart as the people that I'm talking with. So the warm fuzzies are mutual. I'm getting goosebumps all over tonight.
Oh no! Oh wow!
But
I have faith in you. See, we're both in black. See, we just need the little white tab here, and then we're.
That's yeah. Well, nice little collar action going.
If Katie Gridwell was here, she would have done that. I'm sure.
She would have gotten the full like nun's habit. Yeah, that's.
She probably would have been ready to do a local production of Sound of Music if at a rate.
Well, we love you, Katie, and we also love you, Jeff, and all of Earth's Mightiest critics. We love you out there for joining us and hanging out, listening to us or watching us talk about Knives Out 3. If you have any thoughts about the film or our interpretation of it, feel free to leave a comment down below. If you like this show, please like, subscribe, and ring the bell for notifications. Check out Jeff's information and all of Earth's Mightiest critics down below, including probably tomorrow when I get to it. I'll post a link to that podcast from the 2 priests talking about Wake Up Dead Man. I do recommend that you listen to it. It's very informative and kind of eye-opening in some regards. And yeah, until next time, whenever that is, whatever that is, thank you very much and take care.